Hello and welcome to this analysis of Vultures by Chinua Achebe. At first glance it would be easy to think of this poem as a poem about either the vultures described at the beginning or about the commandant of Belsen concentration camp. But in reality I would say it's not a poem about either of these things, and it's important to remember that. It's a poem which asks a fundamental question about humanity. It's about the nature of mankind and asks the question, are we inherently good or are we inherently evil? Is this a life in which we can take great hope from the fact that there will always be love, love will conquer all, or should we despair in the fact that even though love is here, there will also always be evil alongside it? To a point, the poem leaves this question open for the reader. However, I think there are some hints about what the poet himself feels as well. In terms of simplifying that question, we have a glass of water. It's the same question, is the glass half empty or is it half full? And I think the poem's asking this question, but in a broader way, relating it to the nature of mankind. In terms of the structure of the poem, it's written in 4 clear sections, and these are represented down this side here. Each of these sections discusses the same idea. How is it that love and evil can exist in the same place at the same time? And it uses a variety of metaphors for this. So I'd just like to make those a little bit clearer. The first section and the longest section is about the vultures of the title, and it describes them in quite unpleasant ways, but at the same time seems surprised that they're still capable of love. The second section, I would say, is about love itself, and it personifies love, and we'll come on to look at that. Then in the third section, we hear about this man, Joseph Kramer, who was the commandant at Belsen concentration camp in the Second World War. And then finally, the poet poses the question in the final section. I'd like to go over these one at a time, if I may. So, first of all, if we look at the vultures from the opening, and we're going to compare the evil on this side with the good on this side. The opening 2 lines, I'd say, fall very much into the camp of evil, in the greyness and drizzle of one despondent dawn. Listen to the alliteration of the D's there, drizzle, despondent, dawn. It's harsh, it's bitter, it's angry. Similarly, the colour grey, I think, is drab, it's miserable. This is not a place where we'd expect to find much hope. However, we're then told that there are these 2 vultures. The male vulture nestled close to his mate. So somehow, even in this misery, they're finding comfort in each other. They're finding comfort in love. So even though vultures are associated with death, they eat carrion, they scrounge from dead bodies, there is a sense of tenderness, a sense of warmth between the 2 of them, and that's going to be very significant. However, the poet then goes on to give us a description of the vulture, his smooth, bashed-in head a pebble. Now, this metaphor for me is quite violent with the words bashed in. Similarly, the word pebble implies that he's cold, he's unfeeling. This is not necessarily a creature who we would expect to be capable of love. So despite these positives, we're still weighing heavily on the side of these as unfeeling, unpleasant creatures. But then again, we have this affection, his head inclined affectionately to hers. This seems tender, it seems warm. So we've got this conflict appearing straight away in the poem. However, the final thought is undoubtedly a grim one of misery, one of death, one of evil. And it's this: yesterday they picked the eyes of a swollen corpse and ate the things in its bowel. It's quite a graphic description here. It's not simply that they ate a dead body, which is their biological function. Pick the eyes implies almost vindictiveness for me. And the fact that they're eating from its bowel, where its waste would come from, it seems dirty, it seems unpleasant, it seems vicious. And these, again, it leaves a sour taste in the mind of the reader as far as these birds are concerned. Even though they're capable of love, they seem pretty dreary, pretty evil. Okay, we then move on to one word isolated on its own, the word strange, which bridges the first and the second section. We've seen isolated words in other poems in particular. Think about Island Man. And here again, it seems contemplative on the part of the poet. It seems that the sight of these vultures have made him think, and what follows on is part of his natural thought process. And it also demonstrates the complexity of the paradox of the coexistence of good and evil. The fact that this isn't something that can simply be answered in 1 or 2 words. Okay, and we then move on to the second section, which I've classed as love. Some people might disagree with me on that, but I think what we do have here is a personification of love. And first up, we're told that love is in other ways so particular, and I think this choosy nature of love makes it seem like a good thing. It makes it seem something which we can envy, something which we can aspire to. However, this love here will pick a corner in the charnel house. Now, a charnel house, somewhere where dead bodies are stored, is the last place you would expect to find love. Yet love will pick a corner here. You could argue, actually, that this should be on the other side, that this is an idea of hope, because even in the most dreary, despondent place, love can still exist. However, what we find about love is that when it's in the charnel house, it might tidy it, which somehow seems maternal, it seems tender, think of the vultures at the beginning. But once it's tidied, it will coil up there, perhaps even fall asleep, her face turned to the wall. Now, first of all, that word coil for me is serpentine. It's snake-like. It seems vicious. It seems insidious. And then the fact that love can fall asleep, even turn her face to the wall. So love is capable of turning a blind eye. Even though love represents all that is good in this life, it's capable of switching off, particularly in the charnel house, particularly in the place where it's most needed. Love can switch off, can ignore. And this is obviously the bad side of love, the negative, the fact that even though there is love, evil will always exist within it. We then move on to our second metaphor, if you like, which is the description of the commandant at Belsen concentration camp. From what I can tell, this gentleman here, Joseph Kramer, was a particularly unpleasant man. He worked first at Auschwitz, where he built a reputation for being very efficient and for driving people very hard in the business of slaughter. So obviously, this is a man who can be seen as a representation of evil. And we have then this fantastic, almost anthropomorphic description of him, who going home for the day with fumes of human roast clinging rebelliously to his hairy nostrils. The description of his hairy nostrils makes him seem sort of Sibian, like an animal, like a monkey or something, not capable of human kindness, human love, and indeed combined with the fumes of human roast, which is a very graphic sensory description of the business of death. It makes him seem evil, it makes him seem abhorrent, it will make the reader cringe somewhat. However, the paradox within this man is, despite being so cruel, so capable of murder, in the second half of his description, we're told that on his way home he will pick up a chocolate for his tender offspring, waiting at home for daddy's return. So even though he's evil, even though he's a killer, he roasts human beings for a living, he will still show tenderness and love to his offspring. And look at this word, daddy. It's childlike. This man isn't the commandant, even though earlier his title is the commandant. Now he's daddy with a capital D, which makes us think of somebody tender, caring, and so forth, which again demonstrates the paradox. Even in this epitome of the evil of humanity, he's still capable of great tenderness. But again, for me, there's a hint that this love, this good in him, will not conquer all, and it comes from these two words. On the one hand, the word roast to describe the smell clinging to him. On the other hand, the word tender to describe his children. And actually, when viewed together, those two words, for me, it's implying something almost like cooking. They both imply, you can apply both words to meat, and therefore, even though we have the tender offspring, there's some hope there. It's still tempered with this roasting of human flesh, and therefore he cannot fully escape the evil that he has done. This takes us very nicely to the final question, the final section in which we're posed the question by the poet. Praise bounteous providence, if you will. And first of all, we're given, so praise bounteous providence is thank good luck, if you will, that grants even an ogre a tiny glowworm of tenderness. So even in this ogre, for example, the man at Belsen camp, the commandant at Belsen, even in this ogre, there is a tiny glowworm of tenderness. There is some hope, there is some beauty, some love, some goodness. However, this is then balanced very clearly with the fact that this tenderness is encapsulated in icy caverns of a cruel heart. And with the caverns of a cruel heart, again, those hard seas, I get the impression that even though this love is there, it's very difficult for it to come out. It's very unlikely to escape. And this is summed up by our final option. So, or else despair, for in that very germ of kindred love is lodged the perpetuity of evil. So even though in the heart of this beautiful love, this seed that could grow into a great and good loving thing, that evil will always exist. That word perpetuity means evil will always go on. And wherever love exists, evil will too. The poet poses this question to the reader: which is it? Which do you want to think? However, I think he gives us his answer in the poem as well. And for me, the answer comes from the structure of the poem. So there are 4 sections down here again, but if we look right at the beginning and right at the end of the poem, the first words, in the greyness and drizzle of that despondent dawn, this is not a world where hope can exist. It's grey, it's drab, it's lifeless. There's a sense of hopelessness, of giving up. And then finally, in that final 2 lines, the perpetuity of evil, the poet's framed his question with the negative. The perpetuity of evil. Evil will always go on, and that's our final thought. The fact that even though love can exist, evil will never go away, and therefore we should despair. Not a happy thought, but one that could be written about in the exam nonetheless. I hope this has been helpful. Thank you for watching, and please do have a look at my other videos, and constructive comments are always welcome. Thank you.